let's grow together, and let's give a warm welcome for Reverend Morton.
We are living in what's been referred to as the information age, and we've been in it for quite a while, and I think of it as the ever-accelerating, always expanding information age, and on occasion I call it information overload age. And I think it began, of course, with Gutenberg and the printing press, and so we've had books and magazines and newspapers, radio, TV, and then the big explosion, which we'll come to in a moment. A number of years ago, I was in Indiana for Christmas, and I brought my grandmother back with me so she could spend a few weeks in Florida during the winter. And as we passed the exit on I-95 on the other coast for Delray Beach, my grandmother suddenly said, "Oh, that's where Delray Beach is. You know, Florence Henderson lives here in a house trailer." And I said, "Now, Grandma, Florence Henderson does not live in a house trailer." And she said, "Oh, yes, she does. I read it." I said, "Well, where did you read it?" She said, "In the National Enquirer. They don't allow you to publish stuff like that unless it's true." So, books, magazines, newspapers, National Enquirer, radio, TV, cable TV, 24/7 cable news outlets, and then the big explosion, the internet. A number of years ago, my partner was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is a particularly nasty form of brain cancer. And a couple of weeks later, a woman walked into my office before the service, and she handed me a stack of papers. And I said, "What is this?" And she says, "They've discovered the cure for cancer." And I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Yep." Said, "It's very cheap, and the medical profession's trying to stamp it out, but here's the cure for cancer." Turned out to be celery juice. But anyway, I must have looked a little bit skeptical because she said, "This is legit. I found it on the internet." So I suppose it's always been that way throughout human history. It's interesting, the factual history of facts. At one time, it was a well-known fact that the earth is flat and that the sun goes around the earth. When trains were first becoming popular as a means of transportation, they were going faster and faster, and medical science warned that you couldn't go any faster than 40 miles an hour because the human body would be unable to withstand the strain. We all know that humans can't fly until they could, or at least with the help of a machine. And when the Wright brothers made their first successful flight, one of their hometown newspapers back in Dayton, Ohio, ran an editorial claiming the entire story was a hoax. They said, in the first place, we know that man cannot fly. And in the second place, if there were such a thing, he wouldn't be from Dayton, Ohio. When I was a kid in school, we were told in biology and health classes that you better take care of your liver because it only has so many cells, and when those die, you're out of luck. We now know the liver generates and regenerates itself. Same thing for the brain. We were told you're born with X number of brain cells. That's all you're ever going to get, so live a lifestyle that will protect your brain and you'll keep all of your cells. We now know, of course, that the brain can, in fact, rebuild itself. Well, it was a fact a few years ago that cholesterol that you found in eggs was bad for the heart, until they discovered that no, it actually has no impact one way or another. Oat bran is good for lowering cholesterol until they decided it wasn't, and then the last I heard, they're claiming, well, maybe it is after all. When I was growing up, margarine was healthier than butter because it was a vegetable product. Now we know that it's much worse for you than butter. Walt Disney's body was cryogenically frozen, and it's being stored beneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disneyland in Anaheim, California. Well, except that's not true, and his family has denied it multiple times, but somehow that rumor refuses to die. Did you know that you can see the Great Wall of China from outer space? Isn't that incredible? I heard that cool little fact a number of years ago, and I began telling everyone I knew about it. What really amazed me was that everyone that I told that to had already heard this and agreed that, yes, that's a very cool fact. Something man-made that you can see from outer space. Incredible. Well, it would be incredible if it were true, but it's not true, not even a little bit. For years, NASA and multiple astronauts have debunked the myth, and yet much of the public still believes it to be a fact. But why? It's because of something called the narrative, which is a story that gets created and then told over and over again. And there are few things more powerful and potentially destructive in this world than the narrative. The narrative is simply an assumption or a set of assumptions widely accepted by the general public as facts. And it is so very easy to accept so-called common knowledge. But Kevin Myers tells us that the problem with popular thinking is that it doesn't require you to think at all. And Mark Twain wrote, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." What a great thought. Except Mark Twain didn't write it. Some say that it came from Josh Billings, and some say Ken Hubbard, and still others attribute the saying to Will Rogers. But as far as researchers can determine, none of them said it. So the fact is that we can only attribute it to that great philosopher, Anonymous. As we'll see, it's sometimes difficult to sort out the facts, let alone the truth. So in the next few moments, we'll be taking a look at facts, the truth, and perhaps what lies between. It's been said that we are drowning in facts, but thirsting for the truth. Or to put it another way, we are at an all-you-can-eat buffet of facts, but we're starving for truth. Jesus anticipated this dilemma when he said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." Well, there is, of course, a difference between facts and truth. For example, it may be a fact that you have failed, but it doesn't mean you're a failure. It may be a fact that you're ill, but that doesn't mean you have to stay that way. It may be a fact that you're struggling financially, but that doesn't mean there's no way out. Facts are merely descriptions of present circumstances, and even if facts are accurate in the moment, they have no power over your future. Here's an interesting question. Is there any such thing as something that is always true all the time? Well, yes, there is. For example, something cannot bring itself into existence. That's absolutely true. Something cannot bring itself into existence. Because in order for something to bring itself into existence, it would already have to exist and able to perform an action. But if it already existed, then it isn't possible for it to bring itself into existence because it already exists. And likewise, if it does not exist, then it has no ability to perform any action since it didn't exist in the first place. Now, do you see why you didn't major in philosophy? So we say things that we claim are facts. Times are tough. The truth is that in the best economic times, there have been people who were desperately poor. And in the worst economic times, there have been people who went from poverty to wealth. Emmett Fox, one of our early New Thought ministers in New York City, told of a woman who came to his office one day, desperate financially. She was a single mother. She was on the verge of losing her job. She was in arrears on her rent and was about to be evicted, and she pleaded for help. And Emmett Fox, as he was chatting with her, noticed that she had a very expensive hat on her head. And he says, well, excuse me for asking, but where did you get the money to purchase that hat? And she said, oh, I made this myself. He said, you're kidding. He said, you could get a fortune for that on Park Avenue. Long story short, she opened a salon and started supplying hats to the fashionable ladies of Manhattan. She became a very wealthy person in the depths of the Depression. Here in the Science of Mind, we like to think that we recognize facts, but we also recognize truth and look at the difference. Now, in Christian Science, which is sort of a second cousin to us, they believe there's no such thing as sickness, death, or matter, that they're all merely illusions. One of my all-time favorite jokes is about a couple of elderly gentlemen who lived in a boarding house, and neither one of them had ever been religious. But they're getting up in years, they know that their time is coming, and so they thought, perhaps, just to be on the safe side, we could check into this religion thing. So it just so happened that the nearest church was a Christian Science church, and they started attending. And they didn't really understand much of what they were hearing, but the people were nice, and they kept going back. And one day, only one of the two gentlemen showed up. And one of the elders says, well, now, where's Mr. Jenkins today? And the man said, oh, he's sick. And the elder said, oh, he's not sick. He just thinks he's sick. Oh, said the man. Well, he showed up by himself again the next Sunday. And the elder said, well, now, where's Mr. Jenkins this week? He said, he thinks he's dead. Well, sickness can be caused by faulty thinking. It almost certainly can and has happened to each one of us. But that doesn't mean the sickness is just an illusion or imaginary. It's something very real that we need to deal with. So that brings us to the question, what if facts really are facts? Well, as I pointed out earlier, they can be true facts and still not be the truth with a capital T. And the reason for this is that facts are changeable. You've heard me say before that prayer changes things because things are subject to change. And so facts are always changeable, but the truth is always absolute and constant. The truth is the same today, yesterday, tomorrow. It doesn't change. And the mystics of every time, every place have proclaimed the same truth. The truth that God is all there is, that God is everywhere present at all times, that God is especially within us, that God is good all the time, and that we have access to that good all the time, and that whatever is not good is not of God, and therefore has no power, and can be changed by turning to the good. So if Mr. Jenkins got sick and couldn't make it that Sunday morning, here's the truth about his situation from the Science of Mind textbook. Disease is a fact, but not a truth. It is an experience, but not a spiritual reality. When I was undergoing ministerial training, one of the last hoops we had to jump through was the written final exam. This was a 4-hour exam, and that year that I took it, it was written by and evaluated by Dr. Tom Sanar, who at the time was senior minister at the San Diego Center for Spiritual Living. And one of the questions on this written exam was, what is the spiritual basis for illness? And Dr. Tom told me later that he gave me 10 bonus points because I was the only person who answered the question the way he wanted it to be answered. What is the spiritual basis for illness? And he said that people wrote all kinds of paragraphs full of this and that theory, when the answer he was looking for was the one that I happened to write down. There is no spiritual basis for illness. Spirit does not know anything about being sick. Matter and its manifestations are real, They're factual, but they're visible manifestations of an invisible truth. Or as the Apostle Paul put it, things which are seen are not made from things which do appear. Raymond Charles Barker wrote a famous essay called You Are Invisible. And what he meant by that, the you that you see in the mirror is just a physical manifestation of the invisible you, which is perfect, whole, and complete because it is an integral part of God, of Spirit. So, don't get confused by the facts. You've heard people say you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Well, whether or not that's true, I would say that you're entitled to your own facts, but there is only one truth. And in the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes tells us that good never compromises with its opposite. And speaking to practitioners, he says the one practicing must be able to look a fact in the face and know that all manifestations are effects and can be changed by changing the mental cause. The practitioner must be able to look at the sick man who's come to him for help and know that perfection only stands before him. He must see beyond the appearance, beyond the fact, to that which is basically perfect. This will not be irrational to the one who's made a careful study of the science of mind and spirit. And Holmes again says, truth knows no opposites. We must know that truth produces freedom because truth is freedom. There's a section in the Science of Mind textbook on various illnesses and what might be the mental causation for those particular things. And he spends a fair amount of time on something that he called false growths, which today we would just call cysts or tumors or something like that. And I was always curious, why was this such a fascinating subject for him? And I think perhaps the reason was that unlike something going on internally, which maybe has been going on for some time before symptoms appear, what he would refer to as a false growth is quite apparent because it's quite visible. In any event, he said that false growths cannot take root in truth, with a capital T, and they can't be fed by truth. In other words, these things do not exist in spirit. And he says the truth we announce is superior to the condition we are to change, which is his way of saying what the Apostle Paul said, which is greater is that which is within me than that which is within the world. Greater is that which is in me than that which is in the world. For 21 years, I toured with a show that we used to call the biggest little show on the road. From the time we arrived at a theater until the time we were done setting up was about a 4-hour job. And we carried all kinds of stuff in an extended length cargo van, and it all fit in there exactly one way. If one thing were out of place, none of the show would fit. And so occasionally people would come to see the show, maybe acquaintances or relatives or whatever, and they would make their way backstage after the show, and they would look at all this equipment all over the place, and they would say, my goodness, where's the truck that you use to haul this stuff around? And I would point out the back door. I'd say, it's that van over there. They would say, you're kidding. You get all this stuff in that van? And I would say, it's a magic van. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And that is true of you and me. Emerson put it poetically when he said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. All that said, it's one of the hardest things in the world to look at lack and say, I am prosperous. And yet, lack is a temporary fact, and prosperity is an infinite truth. So we must seek out the truth, knowing that when we seek, we shall find. And this may, and probably will, require work. Raymond Charles Barker religious science minister in New York City, said the science of mind is not a teaching for the physically or mentally lazy. And it's true that keeping our minds rooted in the truth takes effort and constant effort, which is why Ernest Holmes told us we should spend much time convincing ourselves of the truth. But the time spent, the effort expended, is well worth it, because truth known is truth demonstrated. Jesus famously said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Now, I can say this until the end of time, but it will do no good to say the truth shall make me free unless I really know the truth and until I allow it to let me be free. In other words, the truth means nothing to each of us until it becomes our truth. Raymond Charles Barker went on to say that when someone says, "Oh, it's a beautiful philosophy," you know that person is not going to use it. They don't want to do the creative thinking. They want consolation, sympathy, and someone on the outside to help them get out. Now, Raymond Charles Barker was sort of a tough love kind of guy, and he used to say, if you're looking for sympathy, you'll find it in the dictionary. And he also said that when you solve someone else's problem, sooner or later, they'll manifest a similar or even the same problem. And until they find the truth and start solving their own problems, they'll never really be free. The truth means nothing to us unless it becomes our truth, our only truth. And yet, from time to time, we find ourselves saying, "I know the truth, but this is really tough." Or, "I know the truth, but this," fill in the blank, whatever it is, "this is a real biggie." We believe, in other words, up to a point, forgetting that there is no big or small to the soul that maketh all. It's why the man came to Jesus, and when he said, "Do you believe?" his reply was, "I believe, help my unbelief." In other words, it was a partial belief. It's been said that until you believe it is, you believe it isn't. And so, how does this work on a practical level? Well, as a theoretical example, let's take prosperity. That's been an issue for many of us at various times in our lives. So here's how the process might play out. I'm impoverished, and I wish to change this condition. So I start by knowing that this condition is not in accord with truth, that spirit imposes no lack, and therefore there is no real power behind the condition of lack. So I began affirming the truth of who and what I am, the truth of my being. But I find perhaps that the condition persists, that the facts seem to be contradicting the truth. So I double down and I affirm that the condition is neither person, place, nor thing. There is no law to support it. And I begin to fill my mind and my heart with ideas of faith, of plenty, of the limitless good of God. And I put my whole trust in the law of good, and I feel that my situation is changed. I feel it. Holmes used to say, if you finished a treatment and you don't feel any different after the treatment than you did before, chances are it's not going to be an effective treatment. So I put my whole trust in the law of good, and I feel that my situation has changed. And then, when I'm starting to feel better about everything, I meet a friend who starts telling me how hard the times are, etc., etc. And so I immediately need to start to negate that idea by affirming the truth. Whatever I just heard is not my truth. I'm going to cling to the truth with a capital T. Because if I don't, this doesn't work. Holmes said that to desert the truth in our hour of need is proof that we don't know the truth. Well, the truth is that there is an answer, and a right answer to every problem. There's probably more than one right answer to every problem, but there's always at least one right answer. So the trick is to be able to look at the facts, no matter what they are, and realize the truth, even when, especially when, no one around you can see the truth. Discovery consists of seeing what everybody has seen and thinking what nobody has thought. Old-time Congressman Sam Ervin used to say, "Nothing is so embarrassing as watching someone do something that you said could not be done." Ernest Holmes again, writing in the Science of Mind textbook. What the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principle than to have him repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than to practice it. But the practice of truth is personal to each, and in the long run, no one can live our lives for us. To each is given what he needs, and the gifts of heaven come alike to all. How we shall use these gifts is all that matters. To hold one's thoughts steadfastly to the constructive, to that which endures, and to the truth may not be easy in a rapidly changing world, but to the one who makes the attempt, much is guaranteed. And then he went on to say that the essence of spiritual mind healing and of all true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within and around about. It is the hope of heaven, the voice of God proclaiming, "I am that which thou art that which I am." Remember that desperate, destitute woman who came to Emmett Fox? She discovered the truth, but it wasn't on her head, it was in her head. She realized the truth, and the truth made her free, also made her wealthy. And that truth was the same for her as it is for each of us. I am that which thou art, and thou art that which I am. If we ever hope to determine that there is such a thing as truth, we must acknowledge that we are aiming to discover something greater than ourselves, something that transcends culture, opinion, and mere facts. And in order to do this, we must look beyond our world of effects, beyond the 24/7 cable channels, beyond the doom and gloom thinking of an exhausted world. We must look within ourselves. In essence, it means that we're looking for God. God is truth, the absolute and true essence of being and reality. God, who is the author of truth. If we are interested in eternal truth, beyond the world of facts, we must look to God. And when we look to God, we're looking to the one. Facts are many, but the truth is one. And with that in mind, here's a simple definition of the truth drawn from the great scriptures of the world. The truth is that which is consistent with the mind, will, character, glory, and being of God. What we read, what we hear, and what we speak may or may not be the truth. But what we can prove by actual demonstration can be and must be the truth. The truth is bigger than your aches and pains. The truth is bigger than your age. The truth is bigger than your bank balance or your credit card statement. Your age, your income, your debts, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, all of these things can be measured and reduced to numbers. But numbers are only facts, and the truth is more important than facts. Facts are temporary. The truth is eternal. Facts limit you. The truth sets you free. So do yourself a huge favor. Move beyond the facts and choose the truth. Namaste. Thank you. It's time now for us to exercise the spiritual law of circulation, knowing that as we give, so too shall we receive. And so as you hold your gift in your hand, please know that what you give with love, we will